So I think we should probably start now. And when other people join, they join. So I want to once again thank Brown-Forman for being such a gracious sponsor to Les Dames d'Escoffier in New York. We are honored that you have chosen us to participate with, and we're so thrilled to have these amazing women talk to us about their experiences and learn from you guys, especially today on Earth Day, about sustainability and stewardship in our industry, which, as we were chatting a little bit about beforehand, how important it is for people to understand more about sustainability and what sustainability actually means and what it means in the wine and spirits industry. And I think, being in it, what pioneers we really are in sustainability, because we really take it very, very seriously. Whereas a lot of industries will just say they're sustainable or they're organic or this or that. We really are. I mean, our industry is so regulated that it's very hard to get away with anything in this business. So when we say that we're sustainable, we truly mean, especially if you're certified sustainable. So that being said, I'm just going to say, I'm having a little glass of Sonoma-Cutrer, the Pinot Noir, which is absolutely fabulous. I had the Chardonnay last time, and I want to say cheers to you ladies, and thank you in advance. Is that water, Jackie?
It's water with an electrolyte tablet in it. I
just said oi. So, all right, what are you, Jackie? It's all good. But in any event, ladies, thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to McCauley and take it away.
All right. Well, Francine, thank you so much for having Brown-Forman again. It's really nice to see some of you guys that we were on the call about a month ago, I guess, where we had Kara Morrison, Rachel Berry, and Lexi Phillips. So that discussion was around career path, follow your arrow. Today is completely appropriate in that today is Earth Day. I think the 52nd Earth Day to be exact. And just wanted to say happy Earth Day to each of you. And thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon to talk about sustainability. So as Francine mentioned, my name is McCauley Adams. I'm the Brown-Forman Corporate Brand Manager. Every day I get to talk about Brown-Forman. I get to talk about our employer brand, how it is we take this brand out into the market, which is a little different than normal brand management. But it's been a really, really fun role for me the past couple of years. Recently, though, I've actually had some added responsibility, and now I'm, in addition to, I'm also the communications partner for a new department that is all about ESG, so environmental, social, and governance. We have a new chief of sustainability officer who I get to support every day and help him with some of his communications. So it's very exciting for me to get a chance to sort of do that as well. And so tonight is perfect for what I'm doing every day now. So that being said, I have also had great fortune recently to lead a program called Cheers to the Women of Grapes and Grains. And it was an opportunity for us to take our 7 female master distillers, master tasters, winemakers, and really share their story with our industry and with our consumers in a way that we've never done before. So we had a great Women's History Month, but the nice thing about it is that it doesn't end on March 8th. It doesn't end at the end of March. It's something that we get to celebrate every day. And so today's April 22nd, and we're still talking about it, and we're going to continue to every day of the year. So with that, I am thrilled to be joined by 3 wonderful colleagues, Elizabeth McCall, Assistant Master Distiller for Woodford Reserve, with Jackie Zykan, our Master Taster for Old Forester, which is in my glass. Thank you, Jackie. And Zidanelia, Arcidiacono from Sonoma-Cutrer, our Pinot Noir winemaker. Friends, girls, women, so great to see you guys again, and excited to have a chance to hear a little bit more about what you all are doing in the world of sustainability. So Elizabeth I will start with you. And I know we've done some of these before, but really just to get started, Elizabeth, do you mind just giving us a bit of an idea of how you got into the industry and how you ended up doing what you do?
Yeah. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thanks for having me. So like McCauley said, I'm Elizabeth McCall. I'm the assistant master distiller for Woodford Reserve. And people ask me all the time, like, you must have a chemical engineering degree. That's always like the first thing out of their mouth. Now, I think there's a lot of people that go to school for distilling and all that, which that wasn't a thing when I was in college. So I got my degree in psychology. I have my undergrad in counseling psychology and my undergrad in psychology, master's in counseling psychology. So I was full on going to be a therapist. And then heard about a job opening up at Brown-Forman. Brown-Forman's a fantastic company. It's known really well in Louisville. And when I heard there was an opportunity to use my psychology skills in beverage alcohol, I jumped at the opportunity because who doesn't want to work in beverage alcohol? And I do think that, this is a little form of therapy for many people, much more fun. But I do think that therapy is really important, but real therapy. But anyways, I got started at Brown-Forman as a sensory technician. I was working in the lab, setting up tasting panels and utilizing my skills as a psychologist to read human response to our products. So I worked with all products, not just whiskey, but our wines, our formulated products, our whiskey, tequila, vodka, all of it. And it was a lot of fun. You learn a lot in this sensory lab and you see everything kind of come through the lab. So I saw products that were in development and then products that were already on the shelves. And so that was a really awesome opportunity. But one of the things with quality is you have to understand where quality issues come from. So a big part for me was I wanted to further understand how these products were made and then how to help our teams and the production facilities to not have quality issues come up. And if they do, understand where they're coming from. And so because of that, I kind of worked my way back through the process, started learning more about production of all of our products, and eventually took a class, an internal educational class with Chris Morris, our master distiller, and had just really a good time learning about all of our brands and how we make all of them. And it was more geared towards sales and marketing folks. And I was in the global production team. And so I had a lot of annoying questions, and I showed up and asked all the things. And I also made sure to say to my manager, like, hey, I have interest in being in front of people, if that's ever a thing, you know, like I'm in the lab, but if you want somebody to go out and talk technical or a little more technical with people, I'd love to do it. And so the stars all sort of aligned. And by that summer, I was asked if I wanted to train to be master taster. So I started doing that work and really just learning more of the brand side, like how to tell the stories. And at the time I was working on both Woodford and Old Forester, and just kind of learning the brand, learning how you share those stories. And then I got master taster, and then was moved out and focused solely on Woodford Reserve in 2016, and was senior quality control specialist out with the production team. And so that was a lot of fun, learning a lot. Production's hard. So anybody who works in production, I just kudos to everybody. So working in production and doing quality control out there, and also doing the master taster work. And eventually I got promoted to being assistant master distiller. So I'm trying to say my story in like a very condensed version. But so that was kind of the path in a nutshell. So very quick, in the grand scheme of things, I'm coming on 13 years in the industry, and it's been a great 13 years, and I hope for many, many more.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for walking us through that journey. And yes, to condense 13 years of lots of different roles and lots of exciting things into something just a couple minutes long is challenging. So thanks for letting us know that actually you don't have to be a chemical engineer to become a master distiller. So very cool. Maybe there's hope for me yet. Just kidding. I'm going to leave that to you. No, but since, you know, our subject matter today is sustainability, I'd like to hear a little bit more and, you know, selfishly, I am a former member or board director of the Dendra Fund, and I'll put the link to the Dendra Fund in the chat for everybody. But Elizabeth, you are on the board of Dendra Fund, and you are doing a ton of work on bringing rye back to Kentucky. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that project has been like?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what the Dendra Fund is, I feel like it's one of those weird things, and it's taken me a long time to really understand what the Dendra Fund is. It's a foundation that is focused on wood, water, and grain for the distilling industry, and its focus is on sustainable practices. And really, the main function of Dendra Fund is, yes, they have money to help support programs, but the main function of the Dendra Fund is bringing groups together who all have an interest in a certain area, and getting those people talking and realizing that they all have the same goal, and how do they work together, and by writing grants and different things. So so I first heard about the Kentucky Rye Project back in 2019 or it was like 18, I think 2018, and just learned about that. I was interested in sourcing rye locally. So rye grain grows really well in Germany and Poland. They're kind of the experts at growing rye grain, and then grows well in Canada, northern parts of the US even, but majority of your standard plump rye that distilleries here in Kentucky are sourcing their rye from comes from Europe. And so it's making a long journey to get here. And just thinking about supply chain issues, I mean, supply chain issues are touching everyone, not just in the beverage alcohol industry, but I mean, you can't even get a dress, you know, like you can't get, like, it's just hard to get anything anymore. And so to source local has so much more meaning today than it does even back in 2018. And so when I started, it was like, oh, I just want to minimize our carbon footprint and also just see terroir. I mean, terroir is something that we talk a lot about in wine, and it's a very new subject in the whiskey world, and something we're starting to study, or at least in the American whiskey world, because Scotch definitely has that. But we are, so that was another piece for me. And then as I got involved in the Kentucky Rye Project, you start talking to professors at the University of Kentucky, and they're bringing out these samples of rye grain, and the root system is 6 feet deep. And what does that mean for your soil? So if you're putting rye grain on your winter fallow pasture, your fields, and that are normally just sitting there bare, that would normally have, if the rains come, all that in the winter would just have your topsoil run off and go into your creeks, and it's then polluting all your waterways. But if you could plant rye that has this long root system that's going to actually stabilize your soil, it's going to help prevent from, make you more drought resilient. And it's also in performing carbon sequestration. So, I mean, the rye is actually pulling carbon. So you're actually helping to change the impact of the carbon that it's having on our planet. So and so that's a huge piece for me. That buzzword was like, that was it. You know, that's really not just a sustainable practice, but that's actually regenerative sort of agricultural practices at this point. And that's really awesome. You know, that's really good. And we talk about sustainability, and you want to sustain, but our board of director, or our executive director for the Dendra Fund, explained it really well. She goes, do you want to be, if you're married or you're in a relationship, or you have even a friendship, whatever it is, do you want it to be sustainable, or do you want it to be regenerative, where it's constantly growing and rebuilding itself and all those things? You're like, gosh, I think regenerative sounds much better. And so that's kind of what I shoot for. Yes, we want to be sustainable, but can we be regenerative? So this Rye Project really speaks to that regenerative practice. And so rye grain doesn't grow well in Kentucky because our climate is not conducive to growing rye. You need a cooler climate. It's too humid here. So you need that cooler, drier climate. And so we're working on finding different varietals that will grow in Kentucky. So we're working with our farmers and working with them hand in hand on, well, what practice, like regrouping with them every year, and what practices did you use, what worked in your fields, what didn't. And, you know, talk about sustainability. Francine, you were mentioning earlier, you know, the people aspect. Well, the farmers are a huge part of that. So you ask farmers to grow a grain in Kentucky that doesn't grow well in Kentucky. We're asking them to use part of their land that generates money for them so they can pay their bills, what if it fails? They have no income off of this. So a big part of it is the grant funding that we get in to absorb that risk. So whether their rye is successful or not will not matter to their pocketbook. They were a part of this experiment. And the hope is that they participate in our part of this grant program, and then they will eventually just graduate and see that they're successful, learn how to grow rye, see the benefits of it, and continue doing it. The big end piece is not just growing rye, but then also having it go to seed, and seed that we can use in distilling, brewing, and baking. And that's the real win. And that's where we're really trying to figure out that piece of the puzzle. So Woodford Reserve was the first to be committed to producing whiskey with Kentucky grown rye, especially on any major scale. So we've learned that we aren't having issues in our production facility. And now we're on to the point where we're checking on, is there a flavor difference? And we've seen some minimal flavor differences, but nothing too drastic. And that was just at new whiskey. So it hasn't had any influence of the barrel. So we'll see if that barrel has any impact on that. But there's my Kentucky Rye in a condensed version. There's a lot of pieces to this project. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for telling us a little bit more about it. I think it is really interesting, and it's kind of neat to be able to do something that's definitely out of the box. It hits on a lot of different things. It obviously could potentially help us from a supply chain issue, carbon sequestration. It could help with topsoil runoff. And then also, anything to do to keep our local farmers happy. You touched on that a little bit, but like, what is Woodford's connection to the local agrarian community? Like, when it comes to our partners out there, like how is that relationship, and how do you get to interact with them?
It's been really fun. I feel like I've gotten the opportunity to sort of play a farmer. Like, they let me come out and play on their equipment, get on the combine, learn about harvest, how they do their crop rotations and all those things. So it's really been a fun conversation that we've had with our local farmers. And it's been about Woodford trying to work with them on how do they benefit from us and we benefit from them, and also working with the government on that as well. So it's been a huge kind of coming at it from all angles sort of project. And it's been great to learn about farming practices in Kentucky and just building those relationships. So I can literally call, I've got like a handful of farmers that I have on that I can call anytime and say, okay, here's this crazy project I want to do. I want to grow this grain on your property. Will you work with me? And let's figure out how to do it. I've learned a lot about how to grow even just heirloom varietals of corn. And it was more like, because I wanted to see how would it work than anything else, and the flavor of the whiskey, of course. But it was a fun project.
Well, that's great. I guess the question that everyone wants to know is, how soon can we get some of that Kentucky Rye grown Woodford Reserve?
Now I'm like, okay, so it's about 3.5 years old now. So, and it's not slated to be bottled for a master's collection for another probably 9 years. I know. So maybe we'll do a little sneak peek release. I know it's really depressing in our business. You look at, like, I did a new grain recipe for master's collection last year. And I'm like, oh, looking at just what we have laid down. I'm like, oh, okay, that'll be 12 years from now. I'll be 49 when that comes out. Great. That's exciting. Gotta have patience.
Funny. No, that is kind of a bummer. However, we all know on this call that, whiskey isn't made in a day. Wine's not made in a day. It takes a while in this, this is the long haul. And I did like your comment on regenerative versus sustainable, and the analogy between how we look at growing grains to our relationships. So it makes me think a little bit. No, just kidding. I think it's all very cool. Thank you, Elizabeth. I got one more question. It's a little off subject, but obviously you've got something coming up pretty big in the next couple of weeks. In fact, you and Jackie both, little horse race around here.
What are you talking about? I don't.
Yeah, it's just a reminder, tomorrow's Thunder over Louisville, and that kicks off Derby. So you might want to get a dress and a hat.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No, exciting stuff. Obviously, Louisvillians get very, very excited this time of year. So if you haven't been to the Derby, please come down and visit us for sure. So, okay, Elizabeth, you're off the hot seat. I'm moving over to Jackie. Are you ready? All right.
So
Perfect. Okay, well, Jackie Zykan, master taster for Old Forester, and yes, again, this is my go-to. I don't lie about it. I drink all of our products equally, but Old Forester a little bit more. So there's a lot of history there for me. But Jackie, can you tell us a bit about how you got into your industry and how you have one of the coolest jobs in the industry?
sure. And thank you for the job security, by the way, sipping the product.
Anytime. Do it. Do it.
So I, much like a lot of people in this industry, didn't grow up thinking one day I'm going to work in whiskey. You know, it just wasn't an option, I guess. So when we do things like this, I think one of the things that's so nice that inherently happens is that you are normalizing that roles like this are options for people out there. You don't have to be a chemical engineer. I didn't get a background in chemical engineering. I focused on biology and chemistry in my undergrad with the intention of going into medicine. Patient care was not necessarily aligned with me. When I was an undergrad, I worked at a hospital, and then I tried my hand at working at a veterinary hospital as well, which was great because I could bring my dog to work, and that was wonderful because I was, you know, in school full time and working almost full time. It was just a mess. But I also at the same time bartended for quick cash to get me through college, and I kept doing that. And then my path took kind of a turn when I realized I still wanted to focus on the science side, but I didn't necessarily want to focus on the patient care side. So I pursued a postgrad program in South Carolina for pathology, and ultimately did not end up attending because I followed to support my partner at the time's career path, which brought us to Louisville, of all places. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm not from Kentucky. So bourbon at the time, 12 years ago in St. Louis was, you know, you had the option of 3 bottles of brown spirit that could have been bourbon, could have just been some sort of whiskey, but everyone just called it bourbon. It was beer and a flavored vodka kind of town, you know, still kind of is, I guess, you know. So we moved to Louisville, and the best way I could sort of find a purpose here and to get in the groove and get to know people was to jump back behind the bar and fill my time. So I did, and here's this whole wall of brown spirits I'd never seen. And I kind of set out, I'm a nerd at heart, kind of set out on this quest to figure out every single thing about every single one of them. And I worked my way up from bartender to bar manager to beverage director for a multi-concept group that was based here in Louisville, Kentucky. So I opened all their bar programs, did their menus, their trainings, their bar layout design, all the buying, tons of single barrel selections, things like that. For a French restaurant, for a whiskey concept, for a Mexican concept, for a steakhouse. So it was very broad scope exposure to tasting literally everything, wine, beer, and spirits included. One of my bosses, one of the owners of this group, was a master somm. And so I learned quite a bit from him as far as, I know that I'm tasting things, but the articulation piece and putting some structure around that methodology was really, really helpful for me. And I remember doing a vodka tasting with Tony Abughanum, and was kind of like, I think I know what all these are. I don't drink vodka. I'm not a vodka drinker, and I wasn't at the time either. And he was like, oh, this girl thinks she knows, you know, what's going on. So let's just see. Everyone in the room stand up and sort of like challenge everyone to go through one by one to identify what they were. And I was the only one left standing at the end of it that was like, yeah, like at that moment, I was like, there's something going on here. There's something different. Let's kind of see where this goes. When I had my son, it obviously made me reconsider how I was spending my time. You know, the bar industry is hard and it's unorthodox hours. If anyone out there can relate, you know, you're missing holidays, you're not there at night, you're kind of all upside down. And so it was time for me to kind of consider getting onto the other side of it. And I had been doing brand work the whole time. I don't sit still very well, like a little hummingbird wrapped in a human body. And I said yes to every opportunity that came my way. I did side gigs for Woodford, for Jack Daniels, for Four Roses, for Heaven Hill. I did stuff for Copper and Kings Brandy. I was the Saint Germain brand ambassador. I was all over the place. But I got a phone call one day that Old Forester was growing and they needed someone that had a science background educationally, but also could communicate and speak bartender, if you will, because Old Forester was growing, because craft cocktails were on fire and no one really knew how to bridge the gap between the marketing of spirits in that time and kind of speak to this audience that was falling in love with the brand. So here I am, I guess. I started as a master bourbon specialist, was kind of this like title that we made up. We made up a title, just be honest. And it was this sort of brand ambassador, master mixologist role. I don't like the M word, like it's never been a thing for me. But after seeing the plans in place to open up the new Old Forester home place experience down on Main Street in our original, where the brand started way back in the late 1800s, and kind of seeing how much the brand meant, not just to the family, the company, to the city, and to the growth of Louisville, which by then I had absolutely fallen in love with. I made a commitment to Campbell Brown, who was the president of Old Forester at the time. He's now our lovely chair. It's a great chair. And said, by the time the doors open, I'll be master taster. And he was kind of like, oh, okay, this girl is walking in here saying she's going to do this. But he's like, well, let's get you going. So went through the same sensory training and production training that Elizabeth had to go through too, as well. We have a lot of really great training modules internally, because our products are very, very unique and very specific. And the culture around producing them is very, very unique to Brown-Forman. And so here I am, going on, I want to say July will be my 7th year with the brand. And speaking to you fine folks. And I can't stop staring at the cactus behind you, McCauley. Like it's like gorgeously like flowing out, like the Christmas cactus that's going on here. Everybody look at this. What a moment. I'm loving it. But yeah, that's how I got here. Here I am.
I really wish I could take credit for this. But again, I am at my dad's house. And I'm not sure that my dad can take credit for it, but this is pretty lovely. And I wish I had that skill. But yes, it is a nice little backdrop for today. That's funny. Well, Jackie, thanks for telling us a bit about that. Yeah, it is pretty amazing how Old Forester has had this really wonderful resurgence. Like I said, I'm drinking Old Fo tonight. It's our founding brand, and so it's had its, like all brands and all categories, it goes up. It has its ups and downs, and Old Forester has always, just been this pretty amazing constant brand that's been around before, during, and after, obviously, Prohibition. So we're kind of proud of it. Thank you for telling us a bit about how you got started and how you got to where you are today. So. I know you are, a bit of a tree hugger, a bit of a person who likes to be outside, granola, whatever you want to call it, it's fine. That was, yeah. I'm kind of the same way, but I'm a little more of an indoor cat, just based on who I'm married to. However, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing and what Old Forester's doing with this new tree nursery at the Brown-Forman distillery.
Definitely. So Old Forester, you heard that correctly, has a tree nursery, interestingly enough. So we have some very beautiful properties that our corporate campuses on, our production sites, all of these spaces. When it comes to oak and the long-term vision for oak, the demands that are being put on something that takes 80 to 100 years to mature before we can even utilize it for a barrel have increased. And so, when you increase demand, but you can't increase supply at that rapid of a rate, you're going to run into trouble. So we are doing our best to make sure that we are putting in the research to kind of figure out how to best manage this in the future. Brown-Forman's a company that, and McCauley mentioned it, Old Forester as the founding brand, we've been around for 152 years now, never changed hands, same family in place, still running the show. The thought process is very much a slowed down pace of long-term what is going to be multi-generational, very, very in-depth work. It's not about a quick, trendy turnaround. It's not, we're going to mass plant a bunch of trees because that's going to sell a bottle. Well, planting trees is a fantastic thing if you're not doing the proper research to see which of those specimens are going to be viable by the time you actually need them, given the changing climate and the other exposures. It's interesting to think about, right? So we do partner, we have these great programs. The Dendry Fund, of course, is all part of all of this. The White Oak Initiative, I saw that you put the link in the chat. That's a fantastic thing to check out. The oak is something that we as an industry need. It's not just, oh, we prefer, no, need by law. We need to have it for our barrels. And so it is our responsibility to make sure that we're putting these things in place. So in the fall, we do acorn collecting to find viable acorns, and then they are grown up for a year. And after that year, those 1-year-old saplings are transferred to the old forest or grounds outside of our Brown-Forman distillery for research purposes. They won't all stay, right? They'll get thinned out to see, survival of the fittest of them. But it's unique in that this is one of the first, if not the first, McCauley urban settings where this research is going on. So these trees are being exposed to an entirely different set of pressures than they are if they're out in, I hate to call it out in the wild, but and more importantly, they're close to home. And so we have the opportunity to include this as part of our story when people come to visit for tourism, and we are able to reach people on a completely different level. If people are closer to it and it's more accessible, then there's higher awareness and higher interest. The more interest, the more funding we can get, the more funding, the more research we can do, and the more help we can do. So it all snowballs out from that. But keeping this in an urban setting is just a really interesting approach. And there's no better brand to do it, I don't think, than the one that literally start to finish, every part of the process happens here in Louisville, Kentucky. So we're kind of owning that space right now. And it's not just us, other people are getting inspired to join in as well. Other distilleries are sort of joining the charge, and that's what we want. We want the messaging to get people excited so that category-wide, industry-wide, we can make an even bigger impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is just so interesting about the White Oak Initiative, the Old Forester Tree Nursery, and just sort of white oak work in general, it is so crucial to the industry. We can't make bourbon without brand new charred oak barrels. It's just the law. And it's the, we talked about regulation at the beginning, and this is a highly regulated industry. That's one of those many, one of those regulations. So it is pretty amazing that even just, despite being competitive with companies like Diageo and Beam Suntory and Sazerac and Pernod Ricard, all of us are, and other industries as well, have gotten together and signed on to this White Oak Initiative. You guys may be aware that there's now a White Oak caucus in Congress at a federal level. So it's obviously making a lot of, it's led now by a congressman from Lexington. So that's a good sign. Obviously he sees it being pretty important to his home state, but there's a lot of really, really good work out there, and certainly encourage you all to, become a little more aware of, and anything you can do as well. The acorn collection thing, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, Jackie, if you don't mind, because I know most of you guys, I think, I don't know how many of you all are in sort of the south or southeast, which is where we're getting most of the acorns from, but Jackie can tell us a bit about the acorn program.
Sure. So company-wide, we actually encourage Brown-Forman employees to participate as well. But this is an opportunity to engage the community. So one of the most beautiful things about the Dendry Fund is that it literally, think like dendritic, it branches out into a bunch of different key stakeholders for all of this. And so this past year, actually, we had an opportunity to take a bunch of inner city kids who literally have never gone out on a hiking trail. They do not have a whole bunch of time exposed outside. This is so silly. Maybe the way that I'm saying it is probably silly, but I was taken back by how impacted even I was with that exercise of taking them out there, explaining to them, this is why trees are important. This is why we need to be focusing on this. Here's what we're going to do. Everybody go grab a bag. They all had a competition about it, right? I'm going to find more acorns than you. And they all got super pumped. But I think one of them found a roly-poly, literally like a roly-poly. You don't even think like twice, it's like a roly-poly, whatever. And they all crowded around and we're so excited. And we're like, whoa, oh my gosh, so cool. And I was like, oh my God, the fact, like how many roly-polies have I like dismissed in my life? But this is so meaningful for them. It's moments like that. We are working to provide that little piece of inspiration that sparks care and concern for everything around them and appreciation for all of it. And that's where we need to be with it. But so we collect acorns, we test them for viability. It's basically whether they float or they sink. And then those are sent off. We work with the University of Kentucky and we grow these saplings 1 year and then plant them. Now, this entire initiative is not necessarily like, oh, it's nice and fluffy to talk about green and sustainable and XYZ. We're 20 years into this project now. It started down at Jack Daniel's. We did a lot of work down in Tennessee. So this isn't a new initiative for us. It's just that we're finally able to hold space to talk about it with everybody. And that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long time coming, and being the corporate brand manager, I like to talk about Brown-Forman, and we're doing a lot of really good things, and it's new for us to talk about ourselves, but we do have some good things to share, and so I'm going to continue to put websites for you guys to go on there because I unfortunately know where y'all are, so sorry. But no, Jackie, it's so great to hear you talk about that. I love the story of the roly-polies. I mean, there is something so wonderful about taking children into nature. I'm actually taking my daughters to a very special garden tomorrow morning. They have no idea, and it'll mean way more to me than it will to them. They're 5 and 6. But I'm pumped and can't wait to take them. But I think it is really important. And they're not going to remember, and probably whiskey didn't even come up in discussion when you're talking to children. I mean, certainly we don't really talk. But there are so many great opportunities for our company and for this industry to really do so much like we're doing in the community. It's pretty cool. So thank you for telling us a bit about it. Okay, now we're going out west, and Z, would love to switch gears and talk to you a little bit. We've talked about trees, we talked about grain, and now I know we're doing some really, really wonderful things at Sonoma-Cutrer on water. But first, Z, can you tell us a bit about how you got into the industry?
Well, hi everyone. Zidanelia Arcidiacono. You did an amazing job with my name, McCauley. I know it's hard to pronounce.
I've been working. Thank you. That just my week.
No, you did awesome. And actually, I truly understand it. It's actually fun to get new nicknames every time. So every time that I visit a new country, well, they'll have a nickname for me because, Zidanelia, it's too long. So I'm Z here at the winery. If I'm in France, I'll be Zizou. So in Argentina, I'm Zeta. So yeah, multiple. So in any nickname, I'll just turn around, see if they're calling me or not. But my career path. Well, I was born in Texas, but at the age of 2.5, 3 years old, my whole family moved back to Argentina. My father was from Argentina, and my mother is from Mexico. So I'm a mix. And I had the opportunity to grow up in Mendoza, so a really well-known wine region. At the time when I was young, I didn't know. I was just, I guess, surrounded by vineyards, and every year we had this beautiful celebration of harvest. And so it was something very natural, right? The first experience that I had with wines was at one of the oldest wineries in Argentina, Bodega Giol, and I got the opportunity to visit it. I mean, I have even a picture that I have now in my bedroom, and I'm this size. Well, I'm still this size, but it's this huge wooden vessel that they had, and it was humongous. And I remember that experience. And what I remember the most, it was just the smells and how pungent the aromas of fermentation, where at that time it was harvest. So all of those vessels were fermenting. But anyway, so when I attended high school, of course, and I had to make a decision of what I wanted to be. And I've always been really good at drawing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to become an architect. But I always thought that you needed to love what you do. And so it's not your job, it's just part of your life. So got the fortune to meet a very well-known winemaker in Argentina, Don Raúl de la Mota. And his granddaughter was my best friend. So we decided to actually both start agricultural engineer. So that was my first step into winemaking, was going for agricultural engineer. And I saw in Don Raúl de la Mota, this winemaker, this huge passion about wine and visiting different countries and talking every single time about wine. You are having a lunch and you're talking about wine, and I'm thinking, it's their job and they're still so passionate about it and they just love what they do. So I wanted to feel the same. So I ended up actually deciding that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to study about potatoes and any other plants, although I love them. I try to have a good green thumb, but I love vines and I love wine. So I moved and started winemaking and viticulture. So in Argentina is where I got my degree in viticulture and enology, and started working in Argentina as well at the same time that I was getting my degree. And at the time, I guess I was very naive. My family, it's not from the wine industry. We don't own a winery or anything like that, but my passion truly guided me to continue in this path. I loved it. So that's why it was a little shocking that at the beginning, it was so hard for me to get the first opportunity. But it only took that time to know that I was in the right industry and that I wanted to continue, because everything represented a challenge for me, and I loved it. So I traveled to France, and in 2007, I landed actually in Sonoma-Cutrer. I was the first harvest enologist, helping Kara, which she did the previous presentation, I guess, a few weeks ago. So I was the first harvest enologist. And since 2015, I was with Sonoma-Cutrer, and then I migrated to Fetzer and worked a little bit with Bonterra as well. And then I came back to Sonoma-Cutrer to become the Pinot Noir winemaker. And that's what I'm doing now. And I'm just in love with my job, and I guess part of my life. So yeah, that's the story of how I got into wine. I think something extremely important for me is being able to challenge my mind. Something that I've been good at since I was little was smelling everything, and connecting that to a memory, right? So, okay, at some point, my mom hated me for that, but now she can see the benefit. I will not enter like some markets because they were way too stinky, or, but again, now I put it to work now. So again, that's a challenge and it's a game for me. So I'm really good with my senses, and I love challenging my nose and my palate to taste wine and to become a good winemaker and make great wines.
Awesome, Z. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, so this is going to mess with me. I'm going to do my best to deal with that. Sorry. But no, I think it's so interesting to hear you talk about smell. And for whatever reason, it just reminded me of when I got COVID around Thanksgiving and lost my sense of smell. And really how having a baby in diapers, it was an advantage. However, there is something so wonderful about, and I've regained my smell, thankfully. The viburnum outside is amazing, and it's just so springy right now. And there's something so wonderful about being able to smell that. But I love hearing that, because there are so many things that obviously our senses we're so grateful to have them, and to be able to put all of them together is an art, is a skill. So thank you for doing what you do, and glad that you do it, because we love what you make. So to talk a little bit about kind of coming back to our subject matter around sustainability. Water obviously is critical in winemaking. How do you find ways to reduce water usage, especially at peak times like harvest at Sonoma-Cutrer?
Yeah, well, I'll just go back just a little bit just to see if I can share with you like how contagious sustainability becomes. So in 2015, when I joined Sonoma-Cutrer, the first goal that I had was to get the winery certified. So it got certified in 2015. And in 2014, all the vineyards, all our own vineyards are certified sustainable. So both winery and vineyards are certified sustainable. But I have to say, this was, I saw so many people that they knew so much about sustainability. They were already doing so much and they care so much that actually truly became something very contagious to me. So my first goal was just to get the winery certified. And I realized in order to become sustainable, you have to touch so many areas. So sometimes it's hard to define, but I mean, I have to tell you, this puts a really good order in the different areas that we looked at the winery and ways that we can improve around sustainability. We have 16 different chapters that we focus on for vineyards as well as in the winery, being water one, extremely important for us because we're being in drought for so many years, and it's something that we probably will continue to be in for the near future. Right now it's raining, so I'm super happy. It's been raining for a couple of days, so it's a great thing here. But again, not just because it's raining now, it means that we can just waste water. So I realized that the way you work and you make a really good program at the business that you're in our case, it's just the winery, you have to truly engage people. And I see that with all the different projects that are run through some Brown-Forman, that you have to get to the people. It needs to be important to them. So that's truly what I focus in. We have great experts in all the different departments. I'm pretty good at talking, although I'm a little shy sometimes. You don't see it, but I am. But I need to be able to bring people in and get them engaged with sustainability. For water, we do recognize that we are in an agricultural business, right? So we have to water our plants. We have to protect them from frost. So how can we do and identify all the processes that are very water intense and look at ways that we can reduce that water and only use what it's needed? It's gonna just make us more efficient and more sustainable. So examples at the vineyards. So frost protection, hopefully will be done in a couple of days. We'll be almost out of frost danger. But we'll be protecting our vineyards with fans. So we utilize wind actually to protect our vines from frost. When before we had to use sprinklers that will sprinkle water, well, that's not an option for us anymore. We also are very smart about the way we water our plants. So we do also plant cover crops that truly helps you with the soils and the water retention, like Elizabeth was mentioning. But we time it and we decide what is beneficial for our crop, as well as what is going to improve our soil and water retention the most. And we only water based on the needs of the plant, right? So it's being very diligent with your process. At the winery, things that we do, all the water that we use to clean our vessels and to clean different areas in the winery, all that water gets reutilized and then it goes to water landscaping or our vines. So we reutilize all that water. Now, the use of technology is incredible. And I think that's the tool we all have to push our vendors to develop new things. So I guess here in California, it's kind of not easy, but we all work together to really push our vendors to develop new ways to improve the usage of water. So we have ozone machines and we're testing them in one of the cases, we were able to reduce 50% of the water that we use at the sanitation of our filler by replacing that water with ozonized water. It gives you really good sanitation of your equipment, as well as a reduction of water use and also energy. So there's so many ways. So we put teams together that will focus in one area at the time, and just we really focus on making improvements. And again, the best ideas, the best tips come from the experts. So all our employees, all of us, we make that change. And I think when you give people the opportunity to speak up and to really come with great ideas on water reduction, on waste reduction, on anything, they truly own that tip, and they're going to make it contagious to other people, new people that we get every year, every harvest, seasonals. They learn that that's extremely important for us at Sonoma-Cutrer, and they continue in that path. So it's being very rewarding to me to see other co-workers actually thinking from something very simple, ask, well, how are we ordering our yeast? Are we ordering this tiny little packages, or actually we can order a 10-kilo bag, right? So they start to think about those things to really have an impact around sustainability and be very, very conscious about how we run our winery.
It's so interesting to hear about. I know the last time we talked about this, you said that there might be alarms that go off in the middle of the night, and that means that the fans get going. And at one point it was the sprinklers, now it's the fans. Francine asked specifically about drip irrigation. Francine, do you want to ask that question? Kind of getting towards the end, I want to make sure that we are able.
Yeah, no, I was just, sorry, can you hear me? I'm actually in my car, sorry. Yeah, and I was curious, are you using drip irrigation like they do? Well, I use the comparison of Argentina. Is that how you irrigate?
Yes, that's what we do here in Argentina. Yes, as you mentioned, we have in some areas a different system, and it all depends on how many snow we got that year over there. But here we do go with drip irrigation. So what it does is you lessen the evaporation of the water, as well as you're more specific in the place that you're adding the water, so it has a better impact in the plant. Right, but we also check the water that it's required by the plant. So we have some sensors also installed in the soil, as well as some checks that we do with a plant to really water when the plant needs it.
It's so interesting. And
yeah, thank you. Great
question. I guess we are kind of Lorea, if you have anything that you wanted to ask, or if anybody on the call wants to ask Jackie, Elizabeth, or Z, I think now's the time. Maybe not. I think though that I mean, this has been such a great discussion. We're coming up on the hour, but there's really a lot that's going on. Oh, did somebody have something? Or maybe that's my echo again. These are great, but I won't lie, I'm ready for us to all be in the same room together. No, I just, it's really great to hear from each of you all on the work that not only you specifically are doing, but the brands that you're working on. Obviously the importance that each of these brands and that Brown-Forman places on sustainability. I mean, sustainability is it's more than a buzzword, right? I mean, it's obviously something that's around, and it's an entire industry. And Brown-Forman recognizes that it's not an add-on; it's actually a piece of our bottom line. Like, we can't do our work without being sustainable and without thinking in a regenerative manner. And so it's wonderful. Ladams, thank you very much for having us and giving us the forum to be able to talk about this. And Elizabeth, Jackie, and Z, thank you all for doing what you do and for being representatives of these great brands that we have. And thank you for sharing your story, and thanks just for being passionate about the earth. It's wonderful.
And I'll just add to that as well. Thank you. We want to thank all of you guys for doing this for us Friday night. So taking your time, although for you out in California, it's still Friday afternoon. Just want to say thank you. You know, it means a lot to us, and love learning, love hearing all your stories, and thank you for your support. You know, as you know, McCauley, the money goes to our scholarship fund, and that means a lot for a lot of young ladies who want to get into the business and want to learn more. So thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much for the
you.
invite.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.